All right, so I'm going to start here. We're going to start with this first video. I want to go through epithelial tissues, creating flashcards for the 5 epithelial tissues that you're going to need to know for the lab practical. And you're going to notice the first one that I'm showing here. So I want to point out a couple things right from the beginning. Here, let me make my pen a little bit bigger here. All right. All right, so up in the corner of each of the slides, you're going to notice that it says like 100x or 400x. This one on the next slide down here says 100x again. That is the magnification. So there are 3 objective lenses when we're zooming in on things. You're going to see things that say 40, 100, and 400. So obviously, if something is zoomed 40 times bigger than the human eye, right, it's not zoomed in nearly as much than if it's zoomed 400 times than the naked eye can observe. So that's super important as you're going about doing this because this picture that you're seeing, or this slide right here, which you would see under a microscope, is exactly the same thing as this slide. It just zoomed in 4 times as much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label things on this slide so you can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at here. And then just keep in mind that what you're seeing here is just zoomed out. The other thing I want to point out is you're going to see a lot of pixelation. You can kind of see here that it's rather pixelated. That's because the microscope camera that we have available at school to take these pictures when the slide is actually in the microscope is really, really old. And I think we're talking like not even 2 megapixels. So you are going to see quite a bit of noise in these pictures. So I cannot recommend enough, as I finish going through these things, to look at them with the actual microscope. Doing Google image searches is all well and good, but seeing it actually under the microscope with your own eyes, being able to move the slide around and set it up and doing the zooming yourself is so much more beneficial to properly preparing for the lab practical. So let's start by telling you what this is. Well, we know it's an epithelial tissue because that's the only thing I'm going to go through in this first video. And epithelial tissues, remember, you can identify based on how many layers they are, whether they're simple, 1 layer, or more than 1 layer, which would mean that it's stratified. But the other thing that we know about epithelial tissues is that they have 3 cell types. They have a squished pancake-shaped cell called a squamous cell. They could have like a cube-shaped, square-shaped cell called cuboidal, or they could be elongated and pillar-like, and remember those are columnar. So looking at this, some kids will immediately think, oh, there's definitely layers, right? They'll see like this is the top layer, then they'll see this is like the next layer, the second, and then they'll see this is the 3rd layer, and then the 4th, and so on, going deep. However, that is not what you're actually looking at. So part of the reason I want to spend some time going through this with you is to point out what you actually are seeing in these. This slide right here is actually an alveolar sac taken from lung tissue. So what you're actually seeing here is not cells. This blob that you see, I'm going to point out this blob right here. Hopefully you can see what I'm encircling. I'll do it one more time. This blob right here is not a cell. As a matter of fact, all that you're seeing in this picture, all like the deep fuchsia color, that pink color, that is the cell. So you're seeing lots and lots of cells, but you're also seeing lots of air. This right here, I'm sorry, I'll try to do this one more time. That may happen a lot because for some reason when I put my arm down on the screen, it does this. This right here is air. So you're seeing a bunch of cells, but you're seeing them encapsulating an air sac. And that air sac is called an alveolar sac. So you might remember that from biology, and we will cover it later in class when we talk about the respiratory system. But an alveolar sac is a sac of air that's encapsulated by cells that are encircling it. So I'm going to try to point that out here too. Let me grab a different color. So let's go with green here, and I'll make it a little bit bigger. I'll do that size right there. All right, so I'm going to, let's do this cell right here. So it's hard for me to see where one cell starts and another one ends, so I'm just going to say that that's a cell, that's a cell. Now I'm making them fatter than they actually appear here on this picture. But what you actually are seeing is a single layer of cells, but this single layer of cells actually kind of wraps. It wraps around in 3 dimensions. So most of us can appreciate, so this is actually simple squamous, right? They're squished cells and they're in a single layer. Most of us can grasp that simple squamous looks like this, right? Like this. Single layer, of flattened cells. But since the human body does not occur in a single plane, right, we're 3-dimensional, this that I just drew here is the same. Oops, the marker just went away. Okay, here we go. This is the same as this, right? It's just that that single plane has now been made into like a circle, right? It's like, think about taking maybe the links of a bracelet as you're creating that bracelet, and then now you're connecting the bracelet from start to end, and now you can wear it around your neck as it encircles your neck. Um, this tissue occurs anywhere in the body where you need things to be able to move in or through that tissue really, really rapidly. So, for instance, oxygen, right, which makes our blood red, oxygen is going to pass through in one direction, and carbon dioxide, which kind of makes our blood look bluish when it's rich in carbon dioxide or low in oxygen, it's going to pass through the other way. And oxygen, carbon dioxide doesn't want to pass through many, many layers moving into and out of our capillaries. So what I drew right here, this is actually a cross-section of a capillary. So filled it up with blood. Blood is traveling through that capillary, and as some blood and nutrients leave the capillary, it feeds the surrounding tissue. And the waste products then are going to travel back in that way. So waste is going to leave the body tissues, go back into the bloodstream, and you're going to get rid of it that way by sending it through your kidneys. So when it comes to this tissue type, the simple squamous, it's all about moving things through quickly. I always use the analogy to think about a castle, right? Castles have moats around them, and often fortified castles have these big, thick walls, with armed people on them. And the thicker you make the wall, the harder it is for your enemies to penetrate that castle, to get through the castle wall. But on the other hand, if you want things to come fluidly into the castle and out of the castle, you're going to make those walls as thin as possible. And as a matter of fact, you'd get rid of the walls if you could. Well, our body can't get rid of walls. We're made up of cells. So what your body does in order to move things in and out really, really quickly is it just makes them incredibly thin by making them this squished cell shape, this squamous shape, and it does a single layer of those. So imagine making a castle wall essentially out of a single layer of bricks going all the way around. We don't want it to be stratified. We don't want many, many layers to have to pass through in this instance because we want blood to have a rapid exchange of nutrients. And similarly, in this specific example, we want air to be able to, we want oxygen to be able to move in. If I go back to my colors here, right, we want oxygen to be able to travel into this alveolar sac. And we want CO2 to be able to move out. And we want that to happen rapidly, really, really rapidly, because the air that we're breathing is constantly exchanging that oxygen for that carbon dioxide in fractions of a second. So it's got to travel through those cell layers quickly. So a couple things that I want you to put on your flashcard. Let's grab a black marker here. Is the name of the tissue. So this is simple squamous. Go here, simple squamous. The main tissue type, remember I said we're only going to do epithelial with this first video. So all of them that we label today are going to be epithelial. And then this is really only found in two places in the body that, sorry, my dog is in here. This is only found in two places on the body that you're going to need to know about in class. And that is the two places we just talked about. So it's found in your lungs, and specifically the alveolar sacs of the lungs. But it's also found in your capillaries, the smallest blood vessels. I'm going to say capillary walls, the smallest blood vessels in your body. And the reason, remember, you have this really, really thin layer of cells is all about exchanging nutrients and waste products efficiently. So I'm going to write down the efficiency of exchange. All right. Okay, so that's one of our flashcards down. So we're going to move to the second flashcard here, and you're going to notice I actually have, this is the one that I believe you have a flashcard of, this one at 100 times X. This one's at 100 times X too. It looks similar, a little bit different. And this one you'll notice is zoomed way in. So what you're seeing here with this cell, this is a single cell that you're also seeing right here. I'm going to try to, right here. That might even be the exact one, I'm not sure. No, maybe not. Oh yeah, it might be. Yeah, it is. Yeah, because I can see that bubble. Anyway, I'm going to label some things on this slide because this is the one that you have on your flashcard. So you'll notice this is a single layer of cells. Right here, we can kind of see, right, this is our layer, one layer. It's one cell deep, and the cells that make up this layer are obviously elongated column-shaped cells. Now, not all of them look column-shaped. Some people get fed up with the fact that this does not look like a column-shaped cell, but that's just because of the way it got pressed. When the histologist created this microscope slide, the cell may have actually faced out toward the histologist, and when it got squished between the cover slip of the slide and the actual slide itself, it got squished in a way where it didn't look long. Imagine, I'm trying to imagine, imagine you're squishing a hot dog, right, which is a nice long column shaped. You're squishing a hot dog between two pieces of glass, but instead of laying the hot dog flat on the two pieces of glass, you actually lay the hot dog the long way as if it's coming out toward you, right, and you press the piece of glass down. Well, if you did that, the hot dog would actually just kind of look like a flattened blob. It wouldn't look the shape of a hot dog like you're seeing here. So that is one thing to keep in mind, that they're not always going to look perfectly column shaped or perfectly cube shaped, because they're what you're seeing here is pressed between a sheet of between the glass slide and the cover slip. So otherwise, I hope you can tell that this is simple in the sense that it's only one layer and that it is columnar. Now, on this one, this is also simple columnar, to which some people get a little caught up with the fact that it looks like there might be two layers, right? Right here looks like it's a layer, and right here looks like it's a layer. But this is actually only one layer. It actually is going to be coming down and encircling around like that. So you are seeing a single layer, but you can't see how it's all connected as one layer. You'll know that it's not two layers because if it was two layers, the cells would literally be touching one another. They'd be on top of one another. There wouldn't be this gap. Okay, so if you see a gap like that, that means it can't be two layers, because the two layers will always be laying on top of one another. So the other thing I want to point out is what you're actually seeing in this slide. This is a slide of stomach lining. So your stomach has these little tiny pits, like little pores, like the pores you have on your face that might have blackheads or whatever that appear in them if you're not rather cleanly. So in your stomach, you have tons of little gastric pits as well. And these little pits have these long column-shaped cells that go down the pits. So I'm going to try to move this here. Right, and then they kind of, at the bottom, they curl around like this. Right, and then you're going to have another pit. Right, I'm drawing one pit. Right, but there'd be another pit going down that way and another pit going down this way. So the pit is creating gastric juice and hydrochloric acid, and all of this goes to dissolve food. You're going to create some pepsin, that's an enzyme. But those are created in this simple columnar epithelium. So there are specialized cells in this pit. And I want you to know one of those specialized cells for this. I'm going to just shade it in here for you. So let me grab a marker. Now I'm just going to make it green. Let's say this one right here. I'm going to shade that cell. So this cell that I'm shading, I'm going to say that this one is a cell that we call a goblet cell. And a goblet cell is a specialized cell that secretes mucus. And that should be pretty obvious because your stomach is incredibly acidic. It has a pH of about somewhere between 1 and 2, and that pH is so acidic that it could dissolve steel nails. If you swallowed some nails and they sat in your stomach long enough, they could start to dissolve due to the acidity of your stomach, the hydrochloric acid in there. So you have these specialized goblet cells, which we shaded in green here, which are constantly secreting mucus, which line these pits with a protective covering that prevents the stomach from eating itself, essentially. So you'll find these goblet cells in any part of your in any organ that both is combating the effects of this acid, but you'll also find it in places that just need it for lubrication. So think about your intestines. Your intestines don't have hydrochloric acid in them, but they do have simple columnar epithelium and goblet cells, because that's more about lubricating the stool as it's moving through your intestine, and allowing the stool, right, the feces, to slide out a little bit easier. So, okay. Now I know that's kind of disgusting. So let's actually talk a little bit about some of this now. On this page, I'm going to go to black. Here we go. All right, so this right here is simple columnar. The main tissue type, as everything that we're doing in this video, remember, is epithelial. And on the body, it's really found, and like I said, any place where you're going to have mucus. So if you think about your nose, snot is mucus. So I'm going to write that in parentheses first. Any place that has a mucous membrane. So this would be like the stomach, which is actually what this slide is taken from. But you could also have this in the intestines, both large and small. And you could have it in your rectum, which is kind of an extension of your intestine. And then lastly, your nose. Whoops. Okay, so all those places have mucus in them. Functions of this epithelium is really to create mucus. And this is to, well, really two functions, remember? Protect against hydrochloric acid, but also to lubricate the stool. All right, so 2 down. Let's go to our third tissue here. Now this one doesn't look anything like the other things we just looked at. If you take a look at this epithelial tissue, you do not see a squamous shaped cell or a columnar shaped cell or a cuboidal shaped cell. You don't really see a whole lot of anything. It looks gritty, kind of like a colored styrofoam. I don't know, it just looks really bad. This is how you're going to tell this one apart from the other ones. I think this is the one you have the slide of. This right here, let's pick a different one here. Here we go. So what you're seeing here, this is all blood. If you're wondering what that is here. So this is all blood. Oops, it kind of wraps around even. And this is actually an endocrine gland. So this is the one on your brace mat that doesn't really fit with saying simple or stratified in the cell shapes. Endocrine and exocrine glands look very unique. They look really, really gritty. So that's pretty much what I tell. Right here is the, hold on one sec. Now, this is the glandular tissue. And glandular tissue just has this appearance, this really rough textured appearance. And that's what makes this one, I think, really, really easy to identify. So specifically, this is an endocrine gland. You know it's an endocrine gland and not an exocrine gland, because if it was an exocrine gland, like your sweat glands or your oil glands, the only two exocrine glands you have on your body, they would have a pore or a duct, which would secrete whatever substance is being made, oil or sweat, to the outside of your body. Obviously, well, this technically what we're looking at here in this picture is literally a little chunk of a sublingual gland, a salivary gland from a mouse. And saliva, even though you might think it sounds like a salivary gland could be an exocrine gland because your spit can leave your body. Technically, any glandular substance could leave your body, but spit is not meant. You don't create saliva to spit it out. We create saliva to lubricate food and keep that in our body. So there's no ducts, there's no pores. This is being secreted through some ducts that are going to stay in the body, I suppose, but you won't see the actual surface ducts in any of these pictures. So let's label a couple things here. I'm going to go to black. All right, so this specific tissue is glandular epithelium, but I will be even more specific here that technically this is endocrine. This is an endocrine gland because it releases its substances into the body. That's what endo means. Main tissue type again is epithelial. And location on the body here is anywhere you have glands. So I'm just going to name some specific glands. There are so many of them, right? You could say right here, right, we have a salivary gland. That's the actual example here. But good God, you could do testicles, ovaries. I'm just going to say gonads, and to include both. Your liver, gosh, I'm sorry. Liver, pancreas, the pituitary, the pineal gland. I'm going to stop listing glands there now, but any gland that you could think of inside your body that's secreting a hormone is going to be included in there. And that's what I would put down for the function. The function of an endocrine gland is to secrete either pretty much hormone, saliva, or reproductive fluids. Reproductive cells, I should say. Secretes hormones, saliva, and I should really say or reproductive products. Let's say that, just to be a little bit more vague. Important notes. You won't see a squamous shaped cell or a cube shaped cell or a columnar shaped cell. Oops. You will not see that. I don't know why I can't do a little X there. Instead, you're going to see this gritty texture. So look for gritty styrofoam-like, whoops. Styrofoam-like texture. All right. Now, I think we're getting close to the end here. So we only have 2 left, I believe. So this one looks, I'm not going to lie, this picture, it looks so bad. The amount of noise and pixelation in this picture makes it almost unusable. This is actually stratified squamous. Technically, this is your esophagus. This one is so much better. So you can absolutely see these pancake-shaped cells. They kind of look like eyes, right? All of these are cells just lying on top of each other. So this is stratified, clearly more than one layer, and they're just a bunch of cells just lying on top of one another. And if I double back to earlier when we talked about simple squamous, right? We had simple squamous for the simple fact right here, that we wanted efficient exchange. We wanted things to move through quickly, and it was all about passing through as quickly as possible. Now, it would stand to reason that with stratified squamous, then we want to slow down the passage of things, of materials as they're moving through. But that's actually not the reason we have stratified squamous. We have stratified squamous for a very obvious other reason. Think of your skin. Your skin has stratified squamous epithelium on it. If we layer cells because of friction, as things rub against, these cells are going to get sloughed off, and you're going to lose cells all the time. I mean, over 90% of dust, for instance, in the air is just dead skin cells. So, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the amount of your fecal matter that's being created is actually just your gastrointestinal tract that's been scraped off as food has been traveling down it. So we need lots of layers to make up for the layers on the outside. Think of like bark on a tree, right? As the tree bark falls off, there's tree bark underneath, cork cambium from the inner parts of the tree that are pushed out to the surface. That's kind of what's happening here. So we're constantly replacing the outer apical surface layers, and the ones down here toward the base are getting moved in that direction, right? As these cells on the apical surface get sloughed off. So the reason we have stratified squamous, these many layers of these pancake-shaped cells, is all about reducing the effects of friction. So I'm going to write that here, stratified squamous. And where you have stratified squamous actually are very obvious as well. This is epithelial again. Epithelial. So think about where you have lots of friction. So we talked about, obviously, your skin, your esophagus. Now remember, don't mistake, it would make sense for your stomach and your intestines to have that as well because food's passing through there too, but we need the mucus in those organs more than we need the many layers. So your cheeks, right, the inside of your cheeks do, whoops. But then really, the only other big place that you're going to have that, believe it or not, is in the female vagina. And I'm going to bring that up because this is something that I think is rather interesting and something I didn't even learn until college. So HIV incident rates are significantly higher in gay men than they are in gay women. And the reason for that is not that that homosexual women couldn't have HIV and pass it on to their partners, but it's because of the difference between the way a gay man and a gay woman have intercourse, I guess. So the vagina, since the vagina is many layers, right? If you're an HIV virus, if you're an HIV virus, you have to pass through all these layers of cells in order to find a capillary, in order to get into the bloodstream. On the other hand, if you are an HIV virus and you're trying to get into the bloodstream of a man, maybe an infected male is infecting his partner, the simple columnar epithelium that's present in the rectum is what actually enables, that's a bad word, what makes men more prone to HIV getting to their bloodstream earlier, because it only has to pass through a single layer of epithelium. So the explanation is actually quite simple when you think about it histologically. There are other reasons as well, of course. I'm not going to go into these now. This isn't an epidemiology class on HIV. But I did think that was interesting when I learned that when I was in college. So functions, as we just kind of talked about, even though in this instance, when we were talking about HIV, slowing down an HIV virus to get to the bloodstream is obviously an important function when it comes to having stratified squamous, but it's really about reducing the effects of friction. Totally lost it again. I gotta go back. Here we go. It's really hard. I write on this thing and then it just vanishes on me. So reduce the effects of friction. All right. Any other important notes about it? I don't think so. This one I'm just going to leave blank. We don't really need it to know anything else. This one's pretty obvious when you see it. So, all right, now what are you seeing here? This is the last one. I believe I have several slides. I probably have this and this on one slide. And apparently I have some writing already on it, so I'm going to erase that. We can kind of do that together. All right, so I'm going to erase this as well. So what you're actually seeing on this side is human scalp. So a chunk of your head skin, essentially. And you're seeing so many things. So let me grab a red marker. So this structure right here, actually, oops, apparently I didn't grab a red marker. That's okay, I'll just keep it black for right now. All of these are capillaries. So you've got little blood vessels going through your scalp skin, obviously. If you cut the top of your head, you're going to start bleeding. And actually some of these, if you look closely, some of them are filled with blood. So that one was this one's filled with blood too right here. This one's empty, right? You notice how there's no blood? This one has some blood in the center. So we have blood there, but we also have that simple columnar or simple squamous epithelium that we talked about. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, make a different color. So right there'd be a single layer of cells that allow for the blood to move in and out there. You also have in here, though, you have some adipose, some fat, but we'll talk more about that when we get to connective tissues. There's even up here, you'll see, whoops, right up here, there is some muscle. There's some smooth muscle under the skin here that allows you to shiver when you're cold. So what I want to point out, though, mostly is even though what this is right here, technically this picture is coming from your esophagus, this could very well be a picture that I took zoomed in to the outside of your skin. So right here, let me find a even better one. Okay, I'm going to come down. I'm going to move from this one to this one. I'm zoomed in a little bit more. In this pink section right up there, this is where you're going to have stratified squamous. So if I were to zoom in, on that dark pink section, you would see stratified squamous. Now, right here, something else I want to point out. So I'm not going to show you more stratified squamous in this slide. What I do want to show you is a sweat gland. So this is a sweat gland. And you know it's an exocrine gland because you can see the pore right here, right? This right here is a pore, and out of that pore, you're going to have sweat in this instance. Or you could have oil if it was an oil gland. I just happen to know that it's not an oil gland because if it was, it'd be attached to a hair follicle. You'd see a hair coming up out of it. This, though, is also a sweat gland. Some kids kind of get caught up on there. They're like, well, where's the pore? Where's the duct? What just so happened is that it got cut. Like when this piece, think about cutting, like slicing off slices of ham, right? There's, chunks of fat in one slice of ham, but if you go further down the ham, there may not be a chunk of fat. So what happened is the pore would be in a different slice of this tissue. If I took a different slice, it just doesn't happen to be in this one. So I hope that makes sense. So this is an exocrine gland. Exocrine glands, obviously sweat glands, are found in your skin. So it also makes sense that we're looking at a skin slide here. And that's really what I want you to know about. This is an exocrine gland that's really zoomed in. So this exocrine gland that I outlined right here is what you're seeing zoomed in here. So, all right, let's talk about a couple things then. Name a specific tissue. I'm not going to do stratified squamous again. I'm going to say that this is another glandular one. And this happens to be exocrine. And then the main tissue type again is epithelial, the last one we're doing in this video. Almost done with this video. And then location on the body, obviously in your skin. It's the only place you'd find exocrine glands. Functions, there's only two. To secrete sweat or oil. Technically, the oil is called sebum, but we'll talk about that in the next unit when we get to the integumentary system. And then any other important notes. I would probably write down, if I were you, that that exocrine glands will always be found on stratified squamous, on slides with stratified squamous, because you're going to, well, not always, I suppose, right? If this is the esophagus, you don't have sweat glands in your esophagus. But if you have a skin slide, you will find your exocrine glands. So I'm going to write that. Found on skin slides. So you can have more than one tissue on a slide. And that's a really important thing to note, because remember, skin is actually an organ, and organs are made up of many, many tissues. So as I said, right here, right, there's like maybe six tissues found on this slide alone. There's stratified squamous right up there at the surface. There's glandular right there. There's blood, that's actually a tissue. Simple squamous around the blood vessel is a tissue. There's muscle, and there's fat. So there's, I don't even know how many I just named, maybe 5 or 6. So, but this is all skin. So the organ is skin made up of many tissues. So I hope this helps. I'm going to wrap it up here. This is going to be the end of the video for epithelial tissues. I'll be putting out other videos to cover the other main tissue types. So thank you so much.